Hello everyone, welcome to another riveting session of screen sharing recording by the Mike Nelson team. Just wanted to share with you today a quick video on how to set up an exclusive right to sell listing contract through CTM. Obviously this is going to be used at the time of writing a contract with the seller to get them to be under contract with us to sell their house. You don't have to worry about all of this right now. These are just existing people in my database or in my contract software. So in CTM, you'll make sure you log in as we just did. You'll do create new contract. Again, these are considered the parent contracts where everything you do here will feed to the child contracts, if you will. So it's important to have the names and things like that of your clients correct. So you'll see listing contracts. You'll go right here to exclusive right to sell listing contract. Click on it, hit go. At this juncture, these are kind of some of the critical components of the contract. You'll always have your quick links right here to click on and go to the bottom of the contract, to the top of the contract, to various aspects of it. You can always hit save throughout or save before they sign it. Again, sometimes I sit with my clients and tell them just know that this is a binding contract and it does have legal consequences. And should you have any tax or legal counsel, you should probably seek a lawyer or a CPA. Basically, we are almost always a seller's agency, so I would choose seller's agency. In the case you might not be in a seller's agency, where you'd be a transaction broker, would be from the perspective of if you were having both the buyer and the seller, or could even be within the team itself. So let's say Mike Nelson Team Agent 1 has the buyer and Mike Nelson Team Agent 2 has the seller. We might just go ahead and do transaction brokerage there. Even though we know we're not going to collude between the two parties or the two agents, it's still going to be a protection for us on the transaction brokerage. You're going to do the date. I don't ever use the create by copying from an existing contract. Obviously, you're going to do broker and brokerage firm. We are a multiple person firm right now, so we do work in Keller Williams, so basically anybody can pick up this contract within the office if something happens to you as the agent. What I like to try to differentiate here with a client is, hey, this button is used because if I were to unfortunately die of an automobile accident while we're under contract, somebody on the team or even in the office would be able to consume this contract. One-person firm, obviously, it's in trouble if that contract is between that seller and that agent and there's nobody else that can pick it up. Obviously, what we would do here is we would put the person's name, John, and if they have a middle initial, M. Smith. The other thing we could do here that I don't know if it's been addressed is you can enter a company name. So if you wanted to say this is the Nelson Realty LLC, because it's maybe a property that is with an investor or a landlord with a rental kind of income property scenario, you can do that as well. And it just says when you type in a company or trust name as the seller, you must type the signer's first name, last name, and the title of the signer. So you'll see over here, perhaps it's Nelson Realty LLC is the company name, and the signers, the authorized signers, are John M. Smith, and we can just say they are the executor or whatever their title might be as far as that LLC is concerned. Could even be, president, etc. Okay. Obviously here you can either manually pre-fill in the county or you can go to the drop box. Let's just say it's Boulder County. You're going to pull the legal address up. How do you get to legal address? Typically with the legal address you can go into IRAs and also look at public records. So I'll just show you that real quickly. Let's go into IRAs. And obviously we're going to log into IRAs. And we can do search, and we can do a public record search if we want to. Once we're into public records, We can look at it, but yours may look a little different than mine here because I've just got it customized to give me just the brief fields that I think I need. But in this case, we'll just put down my address. And obviously you got to check the counties here. What do you want to look? Do you want to look at Boulder, Weld, any of these other counties? Let's just leave that alone. Hit apply. Wait for it. That's the street. We'll go here. It pulls it up. And you will see this is us. And max scrolling is sometimes a pain. You'll see our legal description is right here. So we're going to go ahead, in this case, copy that. Go back over, if I can find the tab now, for CTM. And we're going to paste that into here. So there's your legal address. If you have any questions and it doesn't seem right or look right, you can always get a hold of title and ask them. And I know that some of the titles, like First American Title's website or tools, have some more specifics. But generally that looks like that's accurate. So then obviously here, I'm going to go ahead and not use any of these functions up here because I don't know that my house has been on the market in quite some time. So I'm going to type in the address. This would be if you had a street direction right here, obviously, northeast, west, south. We don't. And it's Cedar. And the street type, you can go ahead and type in here, and it'll start pre-filling it in for your drop downs. If you have a unit type or a unit number, like condos, townhomes, city, and the zip code. Okay. So we don't really deal with leases too much right here, so I'm not going to cover that in today's session. The listing period would actually say, hey, this contract is going to be in effect. Let's say we're sitting with the seller. It's going to go into effect today. And I usually put these out for at least 6 months, usually a year. And the only reason I do that is sometimes because I have sellers that decide, they're on again, off again as far as sometimes they'll flake out and say, hey, we're not going to sell now, we are going to sell in 3 months, etc., etc. So just go ahead, and I always say do it for a year. If you get pushed back, then obviously you can adjust as necessary. This talks about the days and the deadlines. So in computing a period of days, when the ending date is not specified, the first day is excluded and the last day is included. So this is basically if the deadline falls on a Saturday or Sunday or a federal or Colorado state holiday, we're basically saying, do we want it to roll over to the next business day or do we not? I'm okay either way. This is just a contract between you and your client. But in this case, we'll just say will not. And the reason this is important to some degree, whether you choose to select a will or will not, is because when you get an offer in by another buyer's agent, they might say will or will not roll the days over. Brokerage relationship, basically in-company transaction, different brokers, that would be 4.2. Hardly ever see that. That would be a relationship though. In-company transaction, one broker, don't use that too much. Seller's agent, if the seller's agency box is at the top of the page one is checked, the parties agree that the following applies. So obviously this is why we check the seller's agency up top instead of the transaction broker. You can read through that language. I usually check 4.3.1.2. It says that this box is checked, broker represents seller as seller's agent, must treat the buyer as a customer unless broker currently has or enters into an agency or transaction broker relationship with the buyer, in which case the broker must act as a transaction broker. So what I'm saying is we are a seller's agency, but if we happen to bring the buyer or our team brings the buyer to the table, we would actually have permission to be the transaction broker. And I would suggest if that happens that we go ahead and do an amend to the broker agreement and go ahead and say we're going to be a transaction broker and have our client sign that at such time. These kind of goes through the difference between a transaction broker. Just in high level, when I'm talking to a client, I'm like, a seller's agency basically is I'm a coach for you, and as a transaction broker, I'm really just kind of a referee. So I have fiduciary rights as a seller's agency, which is why you want us to be that way, versus a transaction broker. I'm really just pushing papers back and forth. and not really advising you on what you should or shouldn't do. Go through the brokerage duties. You should have studied those in your classes, or you should be familiar with those, but you can go through those. You want to know if your client's going to be willing to disclose to prospective buyers any existing offers. So do they want to? Most do, because it drives the price up and we can get into competitive offer situations, but some will not want to do that. So you want to ask your client, are you okay if I get an offer if I go to all the other agents who have shown the property to see if we can get another offer, or do you not wish that I do that? So most will say yes, of course, why wouldn't I? I want to get as much money as I can. Sales commissions right here. Obviously our team is a huge advocate because of the value we bring to the clients and the professionalism that we bring. We feel like we're one of the top teams in the agency. And in the local area. So I think the service that we provide justifies a full 6% commission. Trust me, I work with a lot of agents, and I do know we're some of the best in the company. You don't really need to fill these things out up here. I do not, and again, everybody has their own slight different ways of doing it. I just don't choose to fill in any kind of lease commissions or percentage or gross purchase price or XYZ in dollars, like a flat fee. But if you did want to do a flat rate, you could do it here versus a percentage. So if you had a client that said, I don't want to do 3%, I'll just do a flat $12,000, on a $400,000 house, that's fine, because then you'd actually get more in the event that it doesn't, get 400,000. So then you're going to come down here and say, okay, if it's a buyer's agent, how much are they going to get? Again, our standard model, I shouldn't say standard, but what our team believes in is the local area supports 2.8% for the buyer's agents. And I also believe transaction brokers, in my opinion, should also get the same amount of money, 2.8%. Again, I don't get into flat dollar amounts, but if your client ever wanted to do a dollar amount, we could do that. If this 7.3.3 just says, if so many calendar days a listing period expires, we can have a holdover period. What that holdover period could look like is it protects us in case a seller decides after 30 days or 2 weeks they find the buyer and they want to try to cancel so they can save commissions. This prevents them from being able to do that. So if they called me after 2 weeks of being on the market saying we want to terminate, I might say, okay, that's fine, but I have this holdover period that you signed from the beginning, and if you sell it outside of me, whether it's through another agent or whether it's through yourself, I want a piece of the commission. So that protects us on 7.3.3. I get into we don't pay third-party compensations, so I just kind of let them know briefly if we care to, is we don't know, but none of our vendors mark up products for us to get a kickback. We can't do that. No kickbacks on anything that we do. I get into the MLS exchange, and I basically tell them the property will be submitted to one or more MLS and will be submitted to one or more information exchanges. Basically, just says the seller authorizes us to advertise their house all over the place. That's how we're going to sell it. If they by chance said here the use of electronic and all other marketings that they don't want you to do, if they said don't put me on Craigslist, I don't normally bring this up, but they could say, hey, I don't want to put it on Craigslist. Okay, that's fine. I mean, to me, they may not be knowledgeable enough, because the reality of it is it's going everywhere. To me, Craigslist doesn't really make it any more or less safe. It's still being advertised out to a ton of different places. Seller further authorizes use of data, MLS, and property information exchanges, just basically saying the property will be displayed on the internet and the property listing, so the address and the listing will be displayed on the internet. Bottom line with that is it protects us to be able to say, hey, I have to sell your house, I have to get it on the internet. That's what's selling houses today. If you want me to check will not, it's going to be tough to sell the house, because I don't know how many people I can reach out to without it going through the internet. Property access to the property may be, we're going to do manual lockbox here. There are Sentry locks. I prefer those. Are kind of a pain to use, but if you have a client that's just adamant about it, we could figure it out. But honestly, we have 8 manual lock boxes, multiple codes on those, so they're pretty safe. Broker marketing, I normally just say as deemed by listing broker. Obviously, we tell them, you know what, I don't want to type in all those things we talked about in our listing presentation because we do a ton of marketing, and we do. So here I just kind of say, just know that we're going to do everything that we said. On occasion, you might have a client that'll go, yeah, but I absolutely want it to be on ABC. And so that's fine. We can put that in there if they wanted to. Seller's obligations, advertising. Seller agrees that any advertising of the property must be approved by the broker. I don't really go through that, but it's just something that's there because you're going to get clients that are going to say, oh, but I'd like to go put it on Facebook, and I'd like to go put flyers up around the grocery stores and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's fine. Just make sure that, you know, ideally I'd like to look at it because I want to make sure that they're not setting them up for failure as far as having the wrong price or whatever it looks like. So again, just make sure that they know. We should have discussion if by chance they want to do their own advertising. Basically, here's an important one, 10.3. It just says no listing agreement exists currently, so we want to make sure that we check that is not. There can be some unique cases where they are. It just means that if they are, there's the possibility we have to pay that other agent or somebody a commission. So just make sure that they're not currently under an agreement with anybody. This does protect us from somebody coming back later as an agent saying, hey, I'm under contract with them. Sorry they didn't tell you that, but I want a piece of the commission now that the deal's done. If this ran into a foreclosure, you're going to have a whole nother process on that. So I'm going to talk about that today. Hopefully by now you've probably pulled some comps and you're going to present that or have presented that to your client. So in this case, we would put in the purchase price right here, cash, conventional, FHA, VA. Obviously there's loan limits in certain counties for FHA and VA, so just be smart about that. And whether you want to choose that box. If you got $1 million property you're listing, you're probably not going to have an FHA or VA buyer, so you might as well not put that in there. I don't really have any kind of buyer's closing costs not to exceed anything like that. Most people will just say, well, it just depends on what the offer is and whether we're willing to do concessions or not. Earnest money is typically 1 to 1.5% of the purchase price on average. So if we did $400,000, I might put $5,000. There's no hard and fast rule on it. Some people are crazy and they want $20,000 on a $400,000, and that's true in like maybe a Florida market, but it's not standard here in Colorado. Seller proceeds, how do they want it? Do they want at closing a cashier's check or a wire transfer? Honestly, this is just an agreement between you and the client, and you can change this, you know, up until closing and even the day of closing. So I wouldn't focus too much on it. Make sure they know that there could be some tax holdings and penalties and so on and so forth. It just depends on the property. If it's an investment, it's probably going to have some tax, but we don't give advice on that. We just kind of say, hey, just make sure that the IRS could hold back some money for you, especially if you live out of state and you're selling it in-state or you're international. Basically, we're going to inclusions and exclusions, so really just very much read these fixtures and what's included, because I know this just changed in 2017 to provide some more clarity in theory. So just make sure when you're sitting with a client, sometimes I will say, hey, make sure you read these things, or I'm going to read these out loud so we're very much on the same page, because you're always going to have somebody at the end that says, oh, I didn't know I had to leave behind my Halo smoke detector. I thought I could take that with me, and the buyers are like, I want it, etc., etc. So how many remote controls do they have? Right, if it's a 2-car, it's probably a 2-car garage. It's probably 2 remotes. If it's 3, it could be 2 or it could be 3, depending on if there's a garage door opener. So you'd want to find out from your clients. Other fixtures. So again, this is the case where you can go into our clauses and you can go down and look for the exclusive right to sell, and you can actually choose inclusions right here. I need to fix this a little bit because doesn't totally make sense, because this is more on the buyer side as seen on XYZ. So I'll fix it, but for now you can delete that out. And then obviously, is it stainless steel kitchen refrigerators, white or black? I mean, you don't have to put that information in either, but you can for clarity purposes. So let's say stainless steel kitchen refrigerator. Let's just say they're going to keep all these things. Okay, sounds good. Then you're going to go through and say personal property. I go through all of these. Hey, just know that these are assumed to be included, like storm windows, fireplace screens, all those fun things, storage sheds, and all keys, yada yada yada. Also, carbon monoxide alarms are going to be required, so you can certainly check it. If they have a security system, if they have a satellite system, so on and so forth. Usually the dishes are staying with the TV. Just as any personal property's got to be free and clear of all taxes, liens and encumbrances, except whatever. So if you had anything unique in there, you could put something in there. Trade fixtures, that would obviously be if somebody was running a business out of their house and they had like maybe a massive chef cooking stove of some capacity, so they could cook 700 burritos for breakfast burrito delivery every morning. You would want to go ahead and put that in there as an exclusion. Or actually, I'm sorry, as included. Parking and storage facilities, usually I say, it's ownership, but it could be use only if you're selling like a condo that has a, dedicated parking space or a dedicated garage. Maybe the garage doesn't deed over with the property, but in most cases it's going to be owner of a 2-car attached is what I'll put in here. And then obviously for storage facilities, generally it's going to be ownership of a, shed and backyard, whatever it is. Obviously if you had water rights, that would be for land deals and some things like that, so that's not that common, so I'm not going to cover that today. If they're growing any crops, so if you had a farmer that was making money off of the corn and it was 3/4 of the way through its cycle, they might want to make the rest of their money for when that corn is tilled. Exclusion, so obviously this would be, let's just say they want, this is where I try to get very clear on things. I always ask the sellers, is there absolutely something, to make no mistake about it, that you want to make sure is not included? I mean, just, even though it should be assumed that it's not included, like private personal property, I would say make it very clear in here so it's contractual. So I just listed a house the other day where I had a whole room of tons and tons and tons of Broncos memorabilia, so we put that in there. All Broncos. Okay. Broncos memorabilia, right? Something like that, right? Microwave. About freestanding microwave. Whatever. So on and so forth. Title encumbrances, we almost always do general warranty deed. You can get with title because there's special warranty deeds and things like that. Obviously, if you were doing a where it was like a death and you had a power of attorney, or it was a I'm drawing a blank on the word, so forgive me. But anyways, there will be some cases here where it might be a unique warranty deed. If there was any leases on the property when you're selling it, you would have to put that in here. So if you were selling an investor's property but he still had tenants under lease for another 3 months, that would obviously have to be claimed in here. Association assessments, check with your client and see what it is. It could be $30 per month, it could be $100 per month, it could be whatever. You need to put that in there. Possession, I don't really fill that out, but if your client really wanted to say, I want XYZ time after closing to have possession, or before the buyers could take possession, you could put that in there. I almost always have our clients do a seller's property disclosure form, so that way, because the office does require that with Keller Williams, even if they say don't know anything and they cross all the way through it and say don't know and then sign it, we just have to have some kind of seller's property disclosure form. Lead-based paint, CO2, you can know your rules on that. Condition of the property, obviously, you get into the whole ordinary wear, unless seller at seller's sole option agrees in writing to do repairs. Basically, they got to keep the house in the same condition it was when the buyers went and looked at it. You can get into the rights of broker to cancel, the rights to seller to cancel. I usually don't. It's there. This is a new feature, forfeiture of payments. If by chance the money was not going to be returned because there was a battle over the escrow money, you can do 100% paid to the seller. I usually say divided between the brokerage firm, 1/2 and 1/2 to the seller. Sometimes I get pushed back and I don't really care. I'll put it 100% to the seller. You can kind of go through all of that, maintenance of the property, non-discrimination, that would go through mediation. If there was any provision, so let's just say the client said, I'm not really ready to list it yet. I need another 3 weeks to get the house ready. I might put some statement in here that says, seller and listing broker agree that seller will inform listing broker listing broker through a broker amend that when seller is ready to go live on the MLS. The reason this is important is because if the MLS ever tries to ask for your listing agreement and you signed it today and you didn't put it on the MLS for like a month, they're going to have a fit with that because you have like 3 days to put it on the MLS. Alright, attachments. I don't really put much in here, but you could drop this docs list down and you could go put in square footage disclosure, so on and so forth. I don't really worry about it right now. How do they want physical delivery of the document? It's fax, email, internet. You know, for us, most people are good with email on the internet. You can kind of go through the rest of these. Obviously, you're going to want to put down the buyer or the seller's email address. That's important because when we try to send emails later from within the system, it's going to need to know that. I believe that's the extent of that. So once you hit save, you can actually kind of do a print preview if you wish. Kind of go through it and look at all the areas in blue. What's kind of cool with this contract is almost everything you put in here is blue. And when you get to the bottom, you can see, for me, it actually pre-signs it out as the owner of the CTM, but you could sign it, and you can see that, you know, here is the email for this Nelson Realty, John M. Smith, who's the president. Again, same thing. They can either select the signature, they can mess around with the font and change it to whatever they want. Hit save, that's the critical part. Same thing with font. I'm not going to do that right now just because I'm not really signing this. So with that, I'm going to go back to the previous page. What's kind of cool is you can always click these buttons here, go to the bottom, and if you wanted to go ahead and create a square footage disclosure, you'll see it already filled it out with the name or the street. You would obviously go in and do listing license, probably in most cases is providing here, has not measured the square footage. Go with the assessor's office, go ahead and look at public records. We'll just date it today, and we'll say that the public record said it was 2,900 square feet, and then you'd hit save. And again, same thing, when your client gets it through email and you do a print preview, they can sign it right here. They'll have all the information in it. This is a required document. Close these out. Go back into here. And what this would look like is you could do source of water, which is a requirement if they don't do it on the seller's property disclosure. You can do seller's property disclosure. Just know on this one, it should be completed by the seller, not the broker. We don't know anything about the house, and if we're caught filling it out or putting information in there, then we take the responsibility and ownership of whatever is the history of that house, which we honestly have no idea. We don't live there. So go ahead and hit save, and then again, kind of the cool thing about this now is when you get back into your contracts, and we'll just do a refresh here real quick, you'll see it's actually tied all these things to this client, which is Nelson Realty LLC, and you've got all that information there. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Talk to you later. See you later. Ciao.